Hey, it's TDA, and this is a full guide to Sandustry, at least the content that's currently in here, because it's still in development, so things might change. I'll put timestamps in the description so you can easily find what you're looking for, and if you do, please like the video. Let's start with some basics. You want to make a larger version of the thing that the tutorial already told you to build. I recommend leaving some room on the bottom so you can easily transport in more sand. And also recommend putting it on the side of the water deposit that you have available, and that'll have a practical purpose, but we'll get to that in a second. Also, don't forget that you don't need to do all your watering at a central location. You can just use the water that you find somewhere out in the world and just make sure your sand is getting dumped into that somehow, and it will be wet, and it will be wet forever. For similar reasons, I always recommend that initially you just dig straight down and then you make a shaft all the way up so you have a little bit of a lift. And that means that any water you dig through in the meanwhile will automatically make the sand that gets in here wet, and that's just a little bit of efficiency that you can easily get yourself going with. Now, once you do have a shaft up and running, I recommend that you run a little bit of a belt straight below that. Remember, if you press Control, you can use that in order to make sure that it overrides the stuff you already have in place. And then you can just start digging on the side, and as you can see, you can easily start to transport your sand out. Just make sure you keep the way clear. Once you have a little bit of a supply running, make sure that that sand initially still drops into the water ideally, because any sand that isn't actually wet will need to become wet before it's any use, and then you can start transporting it up and putting it in your gold supply. Once you get a little bit of gold going and you have the filter unlocked, I highly recommend that you set the filter to filter out the sand, the non-wet sand, so that any non-wet sand that drops on top of here will ideally fall back down straight into the water, and then hopefully it does get wet. Now, this isn't the perfect solution, because if this stacks up like you can see happening over here, then some normal sand that isn't wet yet will come through, but whatever you can do in order to kind of optimize, it's going to be worth it. Something else, you will unlock all the wall lights. Make sure you have them up all over the place so you can actually see where you're going. You don't have to guess what's in here. You can actually use it to explore yourself as well. So yeah, just use those quite liberally. They don't cost anything. And if you really want to change their colors, you can. I just use the random ones, but it's probably a little bit more organized if you make them all white or something. Now, all of this residue is going to get in the way very quickly, so let's unlock tier 2, and then we can unlock the flamethrower, and the flamethrower is going to be extremely useful because you can just burn up the residue very easily. Once you put it on fire, it will burn anything that is connected to that, and as you can see, it shrinks down to a tiny little bit really quick. But what we really need is the kinetic press, because that's what is going to turn the burned residue into gold and into seeds. To make all of this a little bit more automated and structured, I recommend you build something like this. So we have a pile of stuff gathering in here. That is going to be where we're going to be burning the burned residue for now, or at least turning the residue into burned residue. I am making sure that anything that is not burned residue is falling through over here. Then I'm have another one of those filters set to not let through any seeds. If you change them up like this, you can do it like that. So that means that the seeds are being blocked from falling through here and go into this collection bucket over here. The burned residue is going to go all the way here into the kinetic press and then is then turned into gold. And then anything else is going to go down here. Now I have another filter set up over here, so any wet sand drops through. Now, as you can see, there is some dry sand in there as well. So if we switch a filter and we do it like this, and we say, yes, you can allow normal sand to get through, and we do that like that. Then we have another place where the normal sand gets through, and then that will be recycled into the system. And we have somewhat of an automated system in order to deal with the residue, but of course we're not quite done just yet, because we don't want to be burning that residue manually all the time. So once you get some gold, unlock the burner belt. I recommend just putting in a little bit of burner belts over here, so any of the residue that drops off the shakers over here is going to be burned. And then of course every now and then you do need to go in and put some flamethrowing power into your thermal blocks in order to make sure that these things have enough energy to burn. But honestly, they take very little power, so you're gonna have to do this once every, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes probably. We'll automate this at a later stage, but for now that will do most of the work for us. Now, of course, if you haven't done so yet, keep exploring. There's no downside to exploring, and especially not because you're looking for this very nice pink stuff, and if you take that, you will see this counter go up, and this will allow you to unlock upgrades. Now I highly recommend that you upgrade your grabber. That's just going to make your life a lot easier, that you take at least one upgrade into the cryoblast, and then after that it's pretty much up to you. I typically tend to ignore everything that's related to drones. I don't think they're particularly useful, but that's completely up to you, because you will get enough of these upgrade points to just unlock everything in the long term. However, initially, like I said, go for the grabber, go for at least one upgrade for the cryoblaster, and then one of each of these upgrades for the flamethrower is again going to make your life a lot easier. Something I noticed not everyone actually knows is that if you have a mix of different things that are completely jumbled together, you're like, oh my god, this is such a mess, but it's actually really easy to clean this up. If you hover over one pixel of whatever you want to pick up, you hold your mouse button and then you can just do this. You can very easily get everything of a single type and then just drop it wherever it needs to go. Same for the wet sand over here. I can easily filter that out like this, dump it back in, and then the same for my gold if I do it like this. Hop and hop and hop, and there you go. We have already cleaned that up. So cleaning things up is a lot easier if you have a larger grabber. Now, at this point you might be running low on water, unlike I am over here, and that's why I recommend building a little bit of an enclosed area like this with an outlet above your water, and then with a little funnel like this. This is how you're going to make sure you can just keep resupplying your water. You don't want to have to do this manually for a very long time. Don't worry, we'll fix that as well. But this is the intended way you do it initially. So just put your cryoblaster to work, then put your flamethrower to the snow. You will create some air vapor, water vapor I should say, and that will now be guided up straight above where your water is. It will go up, and it takes a minute for it to reach the top of the map, but when it does, it will start raining back down. It won't be in the exact same location, so this is why we need a little bit of a funnel to make sure the water just doesn't go through our entire base. But there you can see it is dropping in. It's a little bit wider than the initial area where it went up, and it will drop straight back down in. Now, is this going to be slow? Yes. Do you want to keep doing this forever? No, but this will make sure you never run out of water. Speaking of water, we're also going to need that to deal with the seeds over here. And that is where this setup comes in. Don't worry, I'll walk you through it. So we are collecting the seeds over here. We are then having a filter, make sure the seeds get dropped into this box over here that I've also filled with water. Now I extended my little water supply over here in such a way that whenever I start producing water, it is being redistributed between both the central location where I'm using my sand, as well as this location where I'm putting the water into contact with these seeds so they get turned into wet seeds. We'll automate this again in a second, the water supply, but for them now this is how we're going to do it. Then I am going to open this up, so let me just do this. This is going to be where the water comes in, and we can take out this wall, and now the sand is going to go in here through these portals onto these planters, and plants will start to grow. Now as you can see, I have a couple of different layers for this, and these are small boxes. You want these boxes to be completely closed in because these plants have a tendency to grow everywhere, and if you don't do that, they will escape and you will have to manually correct that, and that's just gonna be annoying. Now, in order for this to actually get you anything, we're gonna need to burn these plants. I'll do that in a second, but everything that comes out here is eventually gonna go in these boxes. I've used these teleporters to also teleport things out. We'll get petals out. Everything goes up here and then down here. Anything that is not petals, also known as gold, will drop into this gold box over here, and then we're gonna need to collect the petals. Now we're gonna get a lot of those, and we're gonna be stuck with them for a while, so make sure you have plenty of room for that. Now what I'm gonna do is I am gonna start to burn these petals. I'll babysit this for a little bit. If you're lucky, then the burning plants will ignite the other plants that are growing again, and this kind of keeps going. Now you can also see I've used thermal blocks in order to collect some of the heat from these fires in order to make sure that I can reutilize that heat. You can see it's starting to slowly build up because we want, of course, this to be as automated as we can get it. In order to make this layout a little bit more efficient, there's two things we're gonna need. We need the clearing frame and we need the pyro dispenser. The clearing frames help to push the seeds to the elevators, so that makes everything a little bit more efficient. And the pyros, of course, go into these little boxes over here, so they can automatically start firing things up in case things slow down again, like you can see that happen to me over here. Now, whenever the fire keeps going, that will add a little bit of fire to the, or charge to the thermal barriers over here, and that will make sure the pyros can start firing up again. This isn't perfect. This will shut down every now and then, so you might have to manually kind of recharge it every now and then. But all in all, it should stay working for far longer than it would without these thermal barriers all around. Okay, now let's deal with all of these leaves, because these are extremely annoying. And that's where this setup comes in. Now, as you can see, I have a lot of leaves, so you might have the same problem. That's why I kind of built this, so we can export the additional leaves we have over here. We might have to manually do some of that, but yeah, long story short, this is gonna take a little bit of work. What I've done over here is I have another filter to make sure that any gold that is produced down here can actually drop down. I close this off for the moment because I'm kind of setting it up, but the gold will drop in here while all the leaves are gonna go up here. We are gonna redesign this a couple of times as we go, by the way, but the basic idea is that we have these dryers over here. Now what these need is actually some water vapor, so we're gonna have to do a little bit of this again. Probably have to close this off first because we don't want the snow anywhere else. Then we are gonna do this, and as you can see, this will start drying the leaves. Now this is a fairly quick process, as you can see. Once these leaves are dried up, what we can do is we can wait for that a little bit, and then we can fire them up, and this will start creating some Florinal vapor. Now this is gonna rise all the way to the top over here, where I have a couple of these condensers with snow on top. Now this is way more snow than I need, but this is just to make sure that I don't have to come back for a long time. This is gonna drop down into this box over here. Now the nice thing with these gold boxes is that nothing else can enter these boxes, so it actually you don't need to filter anything like that. The gold will just drop to the bottom and the Florinal will stay on top of that. Now this is going to require a little bit of babysitting because we have so many petals already. You will probably have the same thing, so just keep making some condense over here so we can start drying. Then we fire up the dried stuff, and then we basically want to expand this box as we go, so kind of like this. You only need a little bit of an outlet, so the Florinal has somewhere to go. We condense it up here, and then it will drop down here. So then slowly we can start removing this ledge and move everything else. Now there's a lot less of this water than there will be leaves, so this will kind of fit together quite nicely. And then after a little while, it should look something like this. Every now and then we will have to light this up. I like having this non-automated for now because you don't want this bucket to overflow and the Florinal to get everywhere. So you can kind of keep in control, and you should have plenty of gold to do whatever you need to in order to keep this working and progress on to the next tier. At this point, make sure you keep exploring as well. Again, there's no downside to that. You do need to pick up the Anomaly to progress the quest. You can get some upgrades along the way. Getting access to the missiles is massively helpful because this just speeds up clearing everything up a lot. If you find some of this red sand and other materials that you're not familiar with yet, make sure you pick them up. You can use your vacuum for that. That's super convenient. Those will just keep stored in a little bit of a tank. You can upgrade that as well. Again, I recommend that you do that, at least pick a couple of those upgrades. And if you find any of these creatures flying around, then pick them up as well. Again, they will just get stacked up and you can spit them out wherever you want and then pick them back up again. And these are extremely useful as well because, especially the blue ones, they create water. And if you find enough of them, basically what you can do is you can create an infinite flow of water throughout your entire facility, so you never have to worry about snow again. Now, these things by themselves don't produce a lot of water, so you need quite a few of them in order for that to start adding up. But you know, once you have it, and you have infinite water unlocked right there. And while you're exploring anyway, make sure you upgrade your rocket launcher. As you can see, I basically completely ignored the shovel and the gun upgrades and just went for the rocket launcher straight away because you get additional rockets, you get a much faster reload time, so you can just basically clear everything out very easily just with the rocket launcher itself. Anyway, back to the Florinal. You will need energy as the next step, and as you can see, we need 100,000, and this Florinal is only providing about 9,000, so that is nowhere near enough. And by the way, we're still producing stuff, so we're probably going to have to add in a secondary place to store all of this stuff for now. In order to make the energy production a little bit more efficient, we're gonna need lava. So find it somewhere in your map, you probably have to dig down a little bit, and then use your cryoblaster to turn it into cooled lava. Then you can use your rocket launcher to turn that stuff into cinder, that's this stuff over here. And you can use your vacuum over here to pick up the cinder and bring it back to your base. Now, just keep doing this for a little bit. You don't need that much lava, but you want to stock up while you're here anyway. You're also going to want to look for copper. That's this kind of two-colored type of material over here. Now, in order to dig that out, you're going to have to pick up your drill. And that is not going to be the most efficient process, but luckily you don't need that much copper either. Again, just remember to pick it up while you go and put it into your vacuum so you don't have to transport it all the way across your facility and then get it out of your sand again. So for some true energy storage, we can do something like this. Now, with this Florinal thing, you can ignore that. That's just because this area was full. And as you can see, I have way too much gold now anyway. But what you want to do is make a nice little battery. I intentionally made it like battery shaped over here. These are the blocks that are called, I think it's copper mold. Yep, these ones over here. So it's not the same as the Florinal one, but these will store a lot more energy. But in order to do that, you are going to need to fill them with liquid copper. Now, in order to make liquid copper, we need some of that cinder that we collected before. You need to put it into a nice little box surrounded by thermal blocks like this. Then we need to fire it up again, and it will turn back into lava, and the lava will start heating up the thermal blocks. Now, this will provide them with a lot of energy, so we can put some of those smelters on top of that. As you can see, I have those over here with some pumps to redirect the fluids. And then all that I need to do is put the copper over here, and then it will get smolten into the liquid version, and it will drop down here. Do you need such a large battery? You definitely don't. I just like building things big. Oh, by the way, if you haven't done so yet, upgrading your base productions with like tier 3 lifts, tier 2 lifts, I'm sorry, as well as some additional shakers will help a lot as well. We'll get to this in a second, by the way. Now, in order to actually power this stuff, we're gonna need these blocks that will guide the power, but most importantly, we need the steam generator. So again, you can see over here, I put some lava into this box. I put some snow, which I then turned into damp again. This is hitting these condensers over here, so the water drops straight down. It gets vaporized again by the lava, and this basically means this water is going to go up and down, and every time it passes through these steam generators, it's gonna produce a little bit of power. And as you can see, I now have well over 100,000 power, even with a battery of a relatively small size. Now, in order to completely automate this, again, I connected this to my water supply line over here. These are snow makers, so this is the water being turned into snow over here. I have thermal blocks, which makes these condensers cold, so I store up the heat from this snow. And this is an infinite loop, basically. So thanks to my creatures producing the water up here, the water gets turned into snow and it is being used up. The water in here will never get used up because this is just going to bounce back and forth. And the only thing that in theory could ever be used up is the lava. Now, if you connect thermal blocks to this, thermal blocks collect the heat from the lava, but will actually use up the lava as well. This doesn't actually use up anything. Or it's so slow I haven't actually noticed that being the case. But yeah, this is an infinite loop for power. Now, that means we have the other half of this technology tree to go, because we can also play around with the Void Rift. Alright, so this is how you get infinite upgrades. I put the void thing up here. This is going to produce some seeds, some of these void seeds. These are going to fall onto these flower, the planter boxes over here, and produce void flower soil. If you put some red sand below that with a filter that allows everything through except for void petal and a red sand, and you will need the advanced filter for this, so you can select multiple stuff. Once you fire a rocket onto these plants, the petals that this produces will start reacting with the red sand and turn into a void bloom. Now, the void bloom will then fall through, and start being collected here by the flux emanator. And this is gonna grow out that delicious fluxite that you can then start collecting again. In order to get basically infinite upgrades. As long as you have red sand, you will be able to get more of this stuff, and the plants over here will keep growing forever. So yeah, this is gonna give you all the fluxite you ever need. You can also use this device over here, the recall shard. This is gonna allow you to teleport back and forth. Honestly, I don't find it that useful, but if you do fill it up, as it is now, if you go anywhere on the map, and I press it again, I will get teleported straight back to that. Now this is going to produce a little bit of residue that you can then use for other things. Honestly, I wouldn't bother about it. The map isn't so large that this is a massive problem, and there are other teleports already on the map as well, so you can use those if you want as well. Anyway, this is going to make sure that you can start unlocking all the upgrades that you might want. Again, I would typically ignore the drones and save them for last, but at least upgrading your tools, at least the tools that you're using, I would say is extremely useful. It is worth noting, by the way, that there's two other creatures you can find that are particularly useful here. You have this creature that can suck up all the residue that you get when you use this teleporter. Again, I barely use it, so it's not that interesting. More interesting is this red one that is going to produce a little bit of red sand. Now, it's not very good at it. It will tend to get stuck. But if you do fire a rocket at it, it will produce a little bit of red sand that you can then use to get more fluxite, so you have an infinite amount right over here. Again, not super efficient, but you know, it is what it is, and it is an infinite way of production. Speaking of upgrades, I haven't really talked about the augments yet, but every now and then you will find these little puzzles on the map that are pretty straightforward typically. There's usually only one tool you can use in those puzzles, and you will need to use that tool to, you know, melt ice or blow something up or whatever. And then you can pick one of these things up, and that will give you a point to allocate. Now, I typically go for the top line. This is going to give you flat increases to your movement speed. That just always works. If you go down the bottom line, you will get more sprint boosts. I don't sprint that much, so that's completely up to you. This doesn't really impact the game that much, so just pick whatever you feel is best for you. Anyway, to get on with the aura farming, we are going to have to reutilize our Florinal. As you can see over here, I removed the battery edition from that. By the way, if you use the power from the Florinal as it will turn from liquid into a thing that you can just fire up again and then make it liquid again, so that's super easy. And if you haven't done so, of course, make sure you utilize some of that lava to automate things like firing up the leaves. You can make a little box over here if you want to make sure that the burner platforms have almost infinite energy as well. I did the same over here. I filled this up with a little bit of cinder, something like this. So you can, you know, put in a little bit of cinder here, and then you put in some fire to that. That will turn into lava, and that will make sure that these things keep firing for a very long time. Now again, the lava does get consumed. As you can see over here, it's slowly starting to drop down. So this is not infinite, but it's very close to being that anyway. Alright, so I'm using some pumps to get my Florinal out of this bucket over here into these droppers over here. And as you can see, if I enable the liquid overview for a moment, I just have a lot of these outputs connected to a single line. It kind of looks nice. It doesn't. You only need a single one if you don't want to spend as much energy as I have. But what's happening here is that these, what are these called? Synthesizers, I think. Where are you? Yeah, synthesizers are turning the Florinal into this Oryxite. That's how you pronounce that. Those are being put on some shakers and then turn into aura light, which is this very beautiful rainbow stuff over here. In order to get the aura out, you need the aura extractor, which is a building that I put over here. This has a radius where it will actually try to consume things. Now, this can be a little bit confusing, so this is why I set it up like this. Now, normally you would put this right under here, but this is actually going to attract this stuff from all across the map, and you will see that happening as soon as I remove this, because it's just going to pull that stuff in. This is going to start to form some crystals, and then if I select the building again, let's see, where is it? The aura extractor over here. I can direct the nano swarm that is in here, those are these colorful things over here, to start mining those crystals. Now, initially this is a very slow process, as you can see. It's only ticking up very slowly, and you will have a lot more of this stuff than you can actually process. But don't worry, we're gonna use up all of this very soon. However, if you go down to the technology tree, as you are collecting more R, you will get additional upgrades to your swarm capacity, speeding things up more and more. You will also get some other upgrades like the Vulcanizer, which is a gun very similar to your flamethrower and cryoblaster that can just produce lava. So that's just gonna make your automation of your entire base that much easier. You can also get the void gun. You don't really need that at this stage of the game. Anything else in here that you are concerned about? Not really. Well, you can produce some prismite, but that's actually not being used for anything right now, because we have reached the end of the current early access. Now, I will be updating this guide hopefully once we get access to some more things. But as you can see right now, just giving you a quick overview. So we're using our infinite water over here to make the sand into wet sand, and we're shifting that out. I'm actually collecting the red sand over here in this box, so I can easily dump it in here. I could automate that probably as well, but again, because we are at the end of the game, it's not really needed. I have way more gold than I know what to do with. We are burning up our seeds over here. I have some additional lava that is heating everything up, so the plants are being automatically burned. We are then burning the leaves into Florinal. The Florinal goes up here. That goes down here in this bucket just in case. It's then being transported into here, turned into Auralite, and then that's going to be turned into some aura farming over here. And that's everything you need. So this is actually a complete beginning to end overview of the base that we need. Quite an enjoyable game, if you ask me. It's not too difficult, although not everything is super well explained at this point. You can experiment a little bit with different layouts, as you can see over here. For example, at some point I got way more of that burned residue than I knew what to do with, so I decided, well, I can just do it like this. Make some additional gold out of it like that. As you can see, it doesn't work that well because there's too much stuff going in here. You can experiment with scaling this up. You could decide to mine out the entire map. Again, there's no real need to do that right now, but you can do it if you want. Get all the upgrades and so on. I'm really looking forward to see where this game goes in the next few tiers of production. Hopefully we can scale things up. Maybe there will be additional worlds. I don't know. Well, let's find out. Either way, if you found this guide useful, make sure to like the video. It does help me out. Subscribe for more content like this, and I hope to catch you in the next one.